Hey everybody, it's your boy, and today's video is going to be about how do we deal with the old guard of the right wing. And I must preface this by saying that I don't mean those who have been there fighting and actually trying to do something meaningful for decades. I mean those who are either useless, who contribute nothing, or those who actively harm those of us who are trying to achieve liberty, who are trying to save the West, trying to save our values, our culture, whatever it is that you want to do on the right. I am dealing with those people, the useless ones, the ones who peddle black pills, and the ones who actively work with the left to save their own skins and their own vested interests. Because this has been an issue that has been plaguing the right wing for the best part of at least a century. There's not been a decade that goes by where the old guard that I'm referring to, we now call them neocons, boomercons. There's not been a decade that goes by where they have not conceded some kind of ground to the left, which has then ended up conceding even more ground to them, resulting in the mess that we're currently in. And moreover, they claim to be true believers. They claim to have principles that they believe in, and that is why you should vote for them, because this time it's going to be different. This time they're going to roll back what the left has done and how they've destroyed the country. They get into power and they talk a good talk, don't they? They say they're going to do this, that and the other, whether that be curbing taxes or trying to bring us back to a certain point when the culture was stronger, back to normalcy, as they like to say. And yet what happens? Either when they do gain power, they do nothing. They sit around and just think, well, that's it, job done, lads. Let's get some jobs for the boys, make some money, see this turn through, try and win it, and if we don't, oh well, we still made a good time of it all, haven't we? Or, if they do something, they go left when they should be going right. Because remember, when they need to galvanise their support base, they're as right-wing as they possibly can be, just like how some of the so-called centre-left, corporate leftists like Joe Biden will veer further left to galvanise their own support base. These guys do the same thing but pretend to be more conservative, more right-wing, more libertarian, and then, much like what Richard Nixon did in the 70s, introduce all this legislation that is essentially leftist. So, for example, Nixon famously introduced affirmative action, increased the size of the welfare state, all these things that you would assume he would not have done being a right-winger, yet he did. Just look at the current situation with the British Conservatives, or so-called Conservatives. These are socially progressive in many ways. They literally spent about £1 million odd on a diversity puppet until pivoting because it turns out it wasn't popular with their backbenchers and their support base. Although if they could, they definitely would have been introducing stuff like CRT, things like that, into our schools and into the government. Moreover, they are also economically leftist. And to be fair, they're not the only people on the right who are economically left. And that is another subject for another day, but they have been increasing the money supply, which has been increasing inflation. They want to nationalise the railways, I remember them saying, although at the same time they privatised Royal Mail. Make your mind up, what do you want? It seems to me that really, the old guard of the right wing are too pragmatic. They like to say that they're pragmatic because they're dealing with the real world, and if you don't deal with the real world, you're never gonna get stuff done. You can't just have this idealistic view of what things should be and then try to achieve it. No, that's utopian, man. You gotta be pragmatic. You gotta give people the money bags. That's right wing. It doesn't matter that we have all these mountains of economic evidence and data that shows that all of this is terrible and doesn't work and should be repealed and replaced with private enterprise and private charity. Oh, no, we can't have any of that. That's not pragmatic. You're living in Ancapistan in your head, living in a la-la land. You're just a crazy radical, man. And yet, they will promise similar stuff to that when they need to get elected or when they need to get elected to positions in the party. So, for example, in the primaries, a lot of the Republicans will pretend to be conservative or more conservative than they actually are, and in this country, when they're trying to become leader of the Conservative Party or whatever other right-wing party, they pretend to be more conservative than they actually are and promise the world to the people who vote, the members. It seems to me that we cannot have these people anymore at the forefront of our movement. They failed, or at the very least, they succeeded in doing what they always wanted to do, which is, I guess, line their own pockets, support their own vested interests. Even if that means supporting leftist views and goals, they'll do so. For too long, these people have been in charge. Somehow, on the non-leftist side of things, we've ended up with this situation where a group of corporatist blank slates are running the show, when we should be having people like Steve Bannon, who's famous, or less famous people like, say, for example, Freedom Alternative, who I shill a lot on this channel, essentially ruling the right, leading policy, trying to get things done. Instead, we've ended up in a situation where these unprincipled blank slates control everything. And look what's happened. Society lurches ever more to the left and not to the right. And we will be told by these people and their supporters, because they do have supporters, quite a lot of them in fact, and what these people and their supporters will say, because unfortunately they have a lot of supporters, otherwise they wouldn't be in control. They will say that, look, we're not doing nothing, we're stemming the tide. Even though the tide is going over this supposing stemming that they're meant to be doing, and their reasoning is that stemming the tide is better than doing nothing, even though they're doing nothing, and let's be honest, it's all we're probably going to get. That might be all well and good, stemming the tide, but to quote Michael Mellis, all conservatism is progressivism driving the speed limit, because that's all you guys are doing. You're not stemming the tide. You're voting for people who probably do agree with a lot of what the progressives believe in, but they want to introduce it slower. So essentially the right is being led by leftists. How this has happened? Well, this is what you get when you allow a bunch of former Trotskyites to become the core of your movement, because that is what neoconservatism is. It's former Trotskyites who were disgusted and outraged by the old left, but were also not really in favour of the postmodernists, so they ended up with the old right as a result, and because the old right were weak and failing, they ended up taking it over. So with that out of the way, what do we do about them? Well, there's only one thing we can do, and that's to purge them. I hate to say it, guys, but that's what you have to do. So how do we go about purging them? Well, luckily we don't need to go around committing acts of random violence and stuff like that. We have as many non-violent means of doing so. So for example, if you're in America, all you have to do is to primary these people, and it looks like that could well happen this year in the midterms. You really do have to make sure that the populist candidate, or the candidate that is the most principled, it doesn't matter if he's a populist right-winger from the MAGA side of the Republican Party, or a classical liberal, or a libertarian like Rand Paul, as long as those people are being supported and pushed ahead of the rhinos and the neocons and those unprincipled blank slates, as long as those people are beating them in the primaries and becoming senators, representatives, etc., and I mean all the way down to the local level, they need to be utterly purged. You're doing a good job. Likewise, in Britain, although we don't have primaries, I do know that party members get to vote on who's going to be the candidate for a particular area. I might be wrong on that, but I think there is a selection process involved within the parties as to who will be standing. That's what we have to do. We have to get into these local places, and we have to vote the principled people in. And it also requires a lot of activism. You have to go out amongst the membership and tell them why these people are good, why you should back them, and why you shouldn't back those people. That is the main way we're probably going to get rid of them, using the political process. Now, obviously, that means that their supporters will still be around, and yeah, you'll probably convince some of them of how wrong they were to support these people. Others will just simply support whoever's the strongest. The others will have to actively be removed because they're dangerous. They have to go. They can form their own party. And that means engaging in gatekeeping. That means you do have to be rigorous, be very stringent in who joins your party, and make sure that nobody's trying to get inside and subvert it. But it's not just the politicians. It's also the people below them that will need to be addressed. The types of people that we go to for our sources of right-wing news, of commentary, etc., of philosophy as well. The people who are thought leaders, the thought leaders themselves will need to be fought against, because there are neocon thought leaders. There are people who are unprincipled, who consider themselves to be right-wing thought leaders, and these people have to go because they're poisoning the non-leftist movements. That means making sure that these people are always pointed out and laughed at. Part of the reason why this Groyper phenomenon happened was because they were sick and tired of people like Charlie Kirk, who claim to be principled right-wingers but actually aren't, gaining a voice, gaining traction in the movement, and basically either doing nothing or just continuing the same mistakes that the old ones made back in the day. Now, the Groypers had their own issues, but they were onto something by going out there and trolling these people and asking them really hard questions. As I said on a previous stream, why should we support Douglas Murray anymore when he would rather attack his own side and work with literal leftists rather than attack the leftists he's working with who are actually against him, the people who are causing a lot of the issues he's written books about? But again, this is a guy who says that we need neoconservatism or a whole book defending it. I mean, and I hate to say it, but those of us in Britain will need to make a choice. Do we have people like Douglas Murray at the vanguard, or do we not? Because Even though he's right on a lot of issues, his principles are not what we need. Look at what he did to Pedro Gonçalves, or whatever his name was. It shows that his priorities are skewed. He's too trusting of certain left-wingers, and if you just read the Madness of Crowds, he sympathises far too much with second-wave feminists, who are radical Marxists, and doesn't like people like Blair White. Say what you want about Blair White, but she's not a neocon. He is. Do we side with the more dissident voices, like those in the Wellington Project that I'm a member of, or people who write for the Mallard? There's loads of different people who could take the neocons' place in this country and in America and other places in Europe and Oceania. I mean, we have to make this decision, and I think most of them, if not all of them, will have to go. And that includes people like Peter Hitchens, who really only exists to tell us that nothing can be done, and just dishes out black pills, and if anything is a net negative, simply because he's trying to make us inactive, because he himself thinks that nothing can be done. He's convinced himself that all is lost. Those types of people need to be purged anyway, because they demoralise. We've been set back at least 100 years because of what has happened to the movement over the past couple of decades. Now, thankfully, it seems to me that things are slowly starting to change, at least in America. You can see that people are waking up and that they need to start engaging in the local level and at higher levels to primary these neocons and blank slates out of the party, the GOP that is. And in this country, I'm not really seeing it. I'm seeing the beginning of it. I am seeing a new grassroots form outside of the Conservative Party that wants to do something for this country. Now, there are people in the grassroots in the Tory party who really do have principles and don't like the fact that people like Boris Johnson rule the party. Unfortunately, the people that are meant to be in opposition to him, I think they're called the 1922 Committee, they're not good enough. These people are considered libertarians, but they're anything but libertarian. And moreover, a lot of them buy into a lot of the woke crap as well, whether they know it or not. Basically, they're still compromises. We need less compromises and more people who will not compromise on any issue, and that's going to take time. At the very least, we know who our enemies are, and we know that we have to deal with them. But of course, they have a lot of backing, don't they? They have a lot of corporate backing, they have a lot of money. We don't really, but I'm confident that slowly but surely these people will be removed because, let's be honest, I think even the public is turning on them to some extent, slowly but surely. So anyway, I think I'll leave it there. I hope that this will start a conversation, and until next time, it's been your boy, and I'll see you all later.